Let's take a look now at the Cowboys offseason. We'll go through a recap of all the players that they've re-signed, that they lost, they traded for, traded away, drafted, and some undrafted free agents as well. We'll start things off with the players that they re-signed, and the Cowboys didn't make a lot of moves in free agency because they went out and they signed DeMarcus Lawrence with the franchise tag. That took up a lot of their cap space. David Irving is the other big player there. With DeMarcus Lawrence, he's locked in for at least another year with the Cowboys, coming off a monster year, 14.5 sacks. Was also, again, he was franchise tagged by the Cowboys. Going to count over $17 million this year against the cap. The Cowboys are once again counting on Tank to bring a lot of the pass rush up front. Next up is David Irving. The Cowboys used a second-round tender on Irving. He was a restricted free agent. Going to count just under $3 million against the cap this year. The Cowboys went a little bit cheaper. There had been some concern that maybe a team could come in and swoop Irving away for a second-round pick, maybe the Colts, for example. That, of course, did not end up happening. He's in the Cowboys for at least another year, but looking ahead towards next year, Irving and Lawrence will be free agents. Can the Cowboys afford to keep both of those players if they play like they did last year? On to some players lost for Dallas. Orlando Scandrick, Bryant were both cut. Then Anthony Hitchens, Keith Smith, and Kyle Wilber, of course, left in free agency. We'll start things off with Scandrick. The Cowboys cut him. Was not much of a surprise. And then he went to the Redskins, signed a 2-year, just under $6.9 million deal. The Cowboys actually have not benefited from the cap savings yet. He was a post-June 1st cut, which means the Cowboys will free about $3 million in cap space once we actually reach June. Of course, maybe the biggest one was Bryant. He turned down a multi-year offer from the Baltimore Ravens and has yet to sign with a new NFL team. Now, eventually, Bryant will sign with a team. It's just a matter of what team and when. But the Cowboys cut ties with and it may have impacted their receiving core in a negative way. The big loss in terms of money was Anthony Hitchens, who signed a 5-year, $45 million deal with the Kansas City Chiefs. It was, frankly, an overpay. Look, I like Hitchens. He is a good number 2 or number 3 linebacker, but I'm not paying him $45 million over 5 years to play that role. The Cowboys would have loved to bring back Hitchens, but it would have been at about half of the cost the Chiefs gave him. Some more players the Cowboys lost. Jonathan Cooper went to the Niners. The Cardinals poached Bene, Benwikere, and Brice Butler. But Cooper is maybe the biggest loss of that group because he was an actual starter last year for the Dallas Cowboys. The Niners gave him just under $5 million. He will compete for a starting role at about $5 million. I would not be surprised if he won that job. A player I know you guys all love, Brice Butler. A lot of buzz. The Cowboys should have kept him, made him into a starter. They did not do that. He goes to Arizona, where he will at least have a chance to be a starter with a receiving core that's pretty decimated overall. A 2-year deal, not going to be worth a whole lot of money either. Then some more losses there for the Cowboys. James Hanna leaves. Jason Witten retires. Both those tight ends retire. And, of course, Ryan Switzer was traded. Witten, in terms of leadership, is without a doubt the biggest loss for the Cowboys in terms of on-the-field play. It's arguing maybe he's more valuable than Bryant. Witten is going to join the Monday Night Football broadcast booth. It's a tough blow for the Cowboys. Witten, a surefire Hall of Famer, had gotten almost all the snaps at tight end for the Cowboys. It leaves a gaping hole on their roster. And then Ryan Switzer, who, as we discussed earlier, was miscast by the Cowboys as kind of a wide receiver running back hybrid. Not a big loss on that end because the Cowboys got Jihad Ward in exchange and also traded for Tavon Austin, who we'll discuss here in just a second. But it is worth mentioning Switzer ended up being one of the better return men in the NFL. We'll see how Austin fills that role. But I want to know from you guys, which player will the Cowboys miss the most? Is it Jason Witten, Bryant, Anthony Hitchens, or Orlando Scandrick? I would guess that most of the votes come in for Witten and Production-wise, it is Bryant. But in terms of leadership, is without a doubt Jason Witten. So, folks, keep those comments coming here on today's show, brought to you by The Guild. Visit stayguild.com and use promo code CHATSPORTS for 15% off your next stay. Think of it as like a luxury Airbnb. Moving on now to the players the Cowboys added. Jamiz Olawale comes in on a trade from the Oakland Raiders. Tavon Austin also comes in with a trade. Same with Jihad Ward. Joe Thomas and Thompson were free agency pickups. We'll start with Tavon Austin, who, yes, listed as a running back. He's going to play, think of him as a Lance Dunbar type role, a space player who's going to split out wide a lot, but is mostly going to be a halfback for the Cowboys. Kind of the way we play with the Rams as well, a space gadget player who's going to help on returns a lot. I am very curious how the Cowboys and the coaching staff uses Austin. Has game-breaking speed, but has never been the player that the NFL thought he was going to be when he was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. In reality, though, he will be what the Cowboys wanted Ryan Switzer to be. Speaking of Switzer, they traded him to the Raiders for Jihad Ward, a former second-round pick. The Cowboys liked him coming out of Illinois. He'll play the 3 technique role for the Cowboys alongside David Irving and Malik Collins as well. Has been a bust, though, with the Oakland Raiders, but Rod Marinelli liked him coming out. If anyone can get the most out of Ward's physical gifts, it's going to be Rod Marinelli. Some more backup depth on defense. Joe Thomas is going to play the Kyle Wilber and Justin Durant role. Special teams for Wilber and a backup at linebacker. Could come in on some nickel packages, but in reality, I think at most he'll be the 4th linebacker for the Cowboys behind Leighton Vander Esch, Jalen Smith, and Sean Lee, when everyone's healthy. On to receivers now. The Cowboys have moved that, frankly, I didn't really like and still don't. They signed Deontay Thompson to a 1-year, $1.8 million deal with $1 million guaranteed. He will compete for a roster spot, and there is no guarantee that he ends up making that roster. The Cowboys wanted another deep threat, some more speed. Thompson could be Brice Butler's replacement in that deep threat, though he will have to beat out Cedric Wilson out of Boise State. Some more players the Cowboys added: Allen Hurns, Cam Fleming, Marcus Martin, and Coney Ely. Hurns, maybe the biggest pickup by the Cowboys in the offseason outside of the draft, of course. There's a real chance that Hurns ends up being the Cowboys' #1 wide receiver this year, which probably isn't a great thing. He's not an ideal #1, although he has shown ability in the past. A pretty cheap deal for Hurns. With Dez Bryant gone, a lot of the bird now goes to guys like Hurns, Michael Gallup, and even Terrence Williams. When Cameron Fleming signed, it wasn't clear what role he would play. Now we do it to the NFL draft. Fleming will be the Cowboys' swing tackle. Barring injury, he'll back up Tyron Smith, and he'll back up La'el Collins at left and right tackle. It really played very well for the Patriots. And there's Coney Ely. The Cowboys drafted a defensive end in Dorrance Armstrong, so Ely will have to battle for his roster spot there alongside guys like Charles Tapper and Dayton Jones. A cheap 1-year deal. It's a prove-it deal with very limited guaranteed money. If Ely doesn't look good in the preseason, he's not going to end up making the roster. So, folks, I want to know from you guys, which addition will have the biggest impact for the Cowboys this year? For me, I think it's pretty obviously Allen Hurns. He is going to have to replace a significant portion of the burden that Dez Bryant carried for the Cowboys. I think in reality, Allen Hurns becomes the de facto #1 wide receiver, even though the ball is going to be spread around and he's not going to truly produce like a #1 wideout. And then 3 more quick players we'll mention in terms of players added: Jason Thompson, Marquise Enough, and Brett Mayer. All guys that'll be camp bodies, and I'll be stunned if any of them make the active roster. On now to the draft. The Cowboys had a couple draft picks. They spent their first rounder on Leighton Vander Esch. Then it was Connor Williams, Michael Gallup, Dorrance Armstrong, and Dalton Schultz out of Stanford. Cowboys' first round pick was Leighton Vander Esch. I know not all of you guys like it, but the Cowboys are very high on Vander Esch, even I think higher on Vander Esch than they were on Derwin James. Just the 1 true year of production, but he's a freak athlete. The Cowboys have comped him at times to guys like Rolando McClain and Brian Urlacher as well. The upside is there in terms of athletic profile and production last year, but he does still need some work and development. Connor Williams in round 2 was one of my favorite picks in the entire NFL draft. I had him as my top left tackle, of course, for the Cowboys. He's not going to play left tackle. He'll kick inside to guard. Between Tyron Smith and Travis Frederick, I think Connor Williams is going to have a great year. The Cowboys' offensive line, assuming Connor is what I think he's going to be, is once again at the top of the NFL. The Cowboys then got their receiver in the 3rd round in Michael Gallup. He will try to beat out Terrence Williams as that #2 wide receiver. I would not be surprised if it happens. He does a lot of things well. Maybe not a true master at a bunch of different things, but Gallup is going to be a very reliable receiver. I like him quite a bit. I thought round 3 was great value. Dorrance Armstrong was the pick in round 4. I didn't necessarily love this one. Although you can never have too many pass rushers, I would have preferred a defensive tackle here. There were some guys like on the board. But if Armstrong is what he was in 2016 as opposed to 2017, it's going to end up being a steal. He put up great numbers in 2016 with 20-plus tackles for loss and over 10 sacks. And then your last 4th-round pick was Dalton Schultz. And fair or not, he's going to have to fill some big shoes alongside guys like Jeff Swaim, Blake Jarwin, hopefully Rico Gathers. Schultz, the 4th-round pick out of Stanford, is going to get a chance to compete to replace Jason Witten. A solid blocker. Doesn't really bring the same pass-catching ability that a guy like Rico Gathers does, but we know the Cowboys run the ball as much as any team in the NFL, want a tight end who can block, and Schultz proved he could do that at Stanford. Then to round out your draft class, it was Mike White, Christian Covington, Cedric Wilson, and Bo Scarborough, all guys who will compete for roles this year, and mostly backup roles. Wilson could be the true Brice Butler replacement. He's going to have a big battle with Deontay Thompson. And then, as they always do, the Cowboys signed a whole bunch of undrafted free agents. Dalton Storm, Jordan Chun among them there. David Wells, the guy the Cowboys brought in for a pre-draft visit, does not offer a lot in the pass-catching game, but he could be an option as a blocking tight end if he really thrives in that role. Some more interior players there: Bryce Johnson, Jake Campos out of Iowa State. Campos might be the guy to watch on that list. Has some good athletic traits. Could be a developmental type tackle the Cowboys try and stash on the practice squad. On defense, Joe Lanning, one of the bigger names on there because he played quarterback and linebacker for Iowa State. The Northwestern linebackers got some talent as well. Was a safety there. Going to play linebacker, though, for the Cowboys. And then to the defensive backfield, I would not be surprised if one of these guys ended up making the roster. I like Cam Kelly quite a bit. Cowboys might try and make him into a corner. I think safety might be his best fit, but keep an eye on Kelly there as an option. And Travarius Ward is also a pretty solid player as well in terms of undrafted free agents. So, folks, grade the Cowboys offseason. How do you feel about all the moves the Cowboys have done? Don't factor in Terrell McClain quite yet. That's not going to be included until he actually signs, but I would not be surprised if it actually happened. Give me a heart for an A, a like for a B, a wow face for a C, and a laughy face for a D or an F. I'm giving it at least a B. It wasn't a great offseason overall. It wasn't a perfect one, but it was a solid move by the Cowboys there. I like their draft. Still not sold on cutting Des Bryant and Jason Witten. Was a big loss, but overall, the Cowboys have invested in a youth movement. I think long-term, that will pay off. Folks, one reminder here, we're going to do another mailbag on Sunday, so get your comments in the comments section. I'll grab them, and we'll bring the best ones up for an upcoming mailbag, folks. I always love doing those, so keep those comments flowing.